Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Goblins and Growlers Podcast. I'm Josh Maltby at Black Cloak DM on Twitter, Discord, Blue Sky, the places, all the places.
Yeah, I'm Brandon Dingus at Wave Brandalore on insert Vogue social media of the day here, depending on when you're listening to it. We want to get right to it because it's not just our time we're wasting today. Well, in addition to yours, but we have a guest. We have a guest today, and I'll set this up real quick. I was poking around on socials the other day, and I got an ad on Facebook for an upcoming Kickstarter, and I looked at it and it looked fascinating to me, largely because I feel like it's an idea that I had a while ago but never had the wherewithal to do anything with. So I'm thrilled now that somebody else is not only doing it but doing it better than I could possibly imagine. But today we've got with us Lauren Small, the creator of Born from Ice, which is a sort of 5e compatible setting in the Paleolithic era. And we're doing this, we're recording this on February 23rd, but you'll be listening to this on March 4th. And tomorrow is when the Born from Ice Kickstarter starts. So we figured this was excellent timing, but let's welcome Lauren in here. Hi, Lauren. How are you doing?
Hey, doing good, guys. Thanks for having me.
Oh no,
Welcome.
believe it. This is a thrill for me too. This is great. Behind the curtain, everybody, Josh was a little late coming to the recording, so Lauren and I had to vamp, and we just had a chance to chat for a little while. And it was really nice just sort of getting to know each other and talking about, taking creative swings on everything. But thanks for making the time for us. We're recording this on a Friday night. So that tells you that we're tabletop guys. We're sitting here talking about this on a Friday night than doing something else.
Born from Ice, it is coming to Kickstarter, like you just said, March 5, probably about 9 a.m. in the morning is probably Eastern time is when it's going to launch. So you can look for it there. I'm sure the link will be in the show notes or something for this.
Oh, for sure.
But what I'm calling it is a Stone Age RPG, just because not everybody knows about how Paleolithic and all the various terms work. Which we can get into some of that, I guess. But it's kind of high concept is it's built on the 5e D&D engine. It's probably the biggest selling point is it is trying to be real Earth, 20 to 50,000 years ago. You can kind of play in whatever specific time frame you want to with that. Different times give you a little bit of different access to some different stuff, but really it's playing in history, in our history, and by doing that, having that as a goal, kind of the big conceit of the whole thing is I stripped magic out of 5th edition, and have rebuilt it back up as just kind of this survival martial thing that's a little bit different. I mean, it's similar. It's going to feel very similar, but it also has some pretty unique things, I think, that are going on with it.
Yeah. I do feel like of the things to strip from 5e, magic is a very bold choice.
Yeah, it's definitely the one that I've heard a lot about during all of the pre-time here.
I could absolutely see that.
Part of my reason for doing that is, I've been playing 5e pretty much, since launch of the edition. I wanted some new challenges with it. I'm the perpetual dungeon master, so I started kind of developing this because I wanted some different things out of the game, and it kind of grew from there. I think the magic fantasy is a lot of fun, but I think for me, it was time to do some different, interesting things. And when you take magic out, you start solving problems in a really different way. The stakes of everything get a whole lot higher, a whole lot quicker. And it's a really fascinating things. Like, some of the things that you may just kind of like hand wave away in a lot of games, like, wanting to track your inventory a little more carefully or how much stuff you're carrying. Like, some of it actually becomes very important suddenly because it's really important to know if you have a thing that will let you survive in this moment. That, when you have good berry you don't really have to care about. So
Yeah, I'll people who've heard the podcast, who've listened to the podcast long enough and aren't tired of hearing me say it, like you'll remember that I like to this really appeals to me because you'll remember that I like to say one of the D&D tropes that I'm really super tired of is just sort of standard elves in the forest magical settings, right? So anytime we can step out of that and try and do something new with the format, that automatically makes me a little bit more excited for it. And then couple that with creating a no magic setting, because I'm actually a big fan of like no magic settings. Like, Lauren, I don't know if you ever played like Darklands. It was the video game from way back. Yeah, I really enjoy that. Like, it's harder to enjoy now because it's 2024 and I've been spoiled by like games with much better UIs. But I really enjoyed that because like your magic was very much limited to like prayers and potions and like you're talking about, like having to solve problems other ways. Like if you're walking down the street in that game and you get jumped by a bunch of bandits, really you have two choices, and that is blade or bow, and that's pretty much it. There's no throwing fireballs or anything like that. You sort of touched on it but didn't really get into it, but you said that you were really like looking for more or something different when you came up with this. I'd like for you to talk just a little bit about, like, walk us down the lane that got us to here.
Yeah. Okay, well, I will give you the medium-sized version of it because there's a really long version, and the short version is probably not enough information. So we're gonna kind of jump back to about 2016, 2017, somewhere in there. I started working a job that turned out to be a pretty bad job. At that point. And that was coming off of a couple of years that had really like kind of a 5-year stint that had just really burned me out in the work that I was doing. My day job is video production. I was working in like TV and video production at that point. And the world of TV can be a very grueling place at times. And the job I was in, like right at the end of 2016, going into 2017, those first couple of months, just it was a really bad place, and I kind of got out of it, and I was so burnt out on what I was doing, and I didn't have another plan on what to do next, and I had just wrapped up running my first like full-length campaign on Roll20 as a DM at that point. And in 2017, this was kind of like right before everybody was into it, right? This is pre-pandemic, so the whole online thing hadn't taken off in the way that it had now. And there was this thing happening in the Roll20 forums where people were like talking about paid DMing and that kind of thing. I was like, well, I DM, I suddenly have some free time because I just quit my really crazy, unhealthy job. Let's see if I can fill in a little gap to make a little extra money while I figure out what my next thing is. And then I was a paid DM for the next 2 years, which, I know there's people who don't like it. It was born out of necessity for me. And I'm going to say right now, I don't recommend it as a job. It does not scale well. For the work you're doing, it does not pay well. It's a shockingly hard job that sounds like it isn't.
We know somebody who was temping as a tech writer and trying to make bills make ends meet using GMing professionally, and they were running something like 10 or 15 games a week plus their tech writing.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, I had enough to pay my bills and to eat food, and that was about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was doing it. I got it to a point where I was kind of doing it full time. Thankfully my wife had a job that had insurance, which was very helpful. But it's a whole thing. And yeah, I think at my max, I was running like 12 games a week, something like that. I had like 60 players that I was running for. I went from being burned out on video production to being like not just kind of burned out on D&D and all of that, but like burned out on the mechanics and the I mean like everything. I mean you run enough things.
Oh yeah.
You're going to get to that point. But like I also loved the storytelling and all of that. And so kind of in my little free time that I had, because I was, with that many people, you're working something like 60 or 80 hours a week, it turns out. In whatever free time I had, I kind of started working on Born from Ice in whatever it was at that point. I was kind of making notes of like, what could D&D be if it wasn't this other thing? So that's kind of the first half of the story. Kind of the other side of it is, in the years kind of leading up to that, I had also gone through some pretty serious stuff in my life. I grew up as a kid in a very conservative Christian, very conservative Christian organization. I had very little education on human origins outside of biblical origins and that kind of thing. And so there was kind of a point in the mid 20-teens where I started digging into trying to learn things and really fell in love with human history, especially kind of the Stone Age periods that I'm dealing with in the game here, kind of that last, I don't know, 50 to 100,000 years of human history leading up to modern humans. And, it was something that took this thing where I'd had kind of a whole faith system, and I was able to kind of replace it with understanding this other thing and researching and learning. And it really kind of touched a pretty serious chord inside me, and that it's very difficult to explain kind of exactly what that is.
Let me ask a question just for clarity. Like, are you saying that like if it touched a chord in you, did it like help? I don't want to say like fill in a hole, but it helped you build a new foundation almost.
Yeah. Because I without like going into everything, like there was kind of a thing where like definitely I went through a loss of faith and then had to rebuild into whatever a new system of worldview and whatever my foundation of understanding how the world works is at just a very personal level. And kind of being able to connect to the past in such a way, and people who went through time periods that are so ancient and yet so close to where we are now, and the journey that I can kind of imagine of how those people lived and how they understood the world. Like it all just kind of very much connected with me, kind of as I was going through that. So that was kind of the stuff that was in my personal life kind of swirling around as I was also starting to deconstruct D&D for myself. So those two things really connected. So I just started kind of playing with those mechanics and really wanted to know, what it would be like. And specifically, I very quickly came to the concept of like, I want to play around in this ancient world because I want to spend time there because I'm intrigued by it, and I want to go there. And I think D&D is a way I can kind of get to it in a way that I can't really any other way. But I want to do it in an accurate way. I don't want to color it with all of the stuff because I stripped out a lot of the magic out of my own life, if you will. And so I wanted to do that kind of honestly for how I got to it in the game. So that's kind of how I got to that point with it. And that was really where that idea of like taking the magic out and like trying to get back to it as a historical era really started.
I just want to acknowledge that is a much more personal and resonant origin story for this than I was expecting, and I'm very glad for it. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There's like it's not like a one-to-one parallel, but for me, I was raised in a religious household, but it was not to the extent that I believe you're describing. So for me, it was like when I was like 14 or 15, I started, doing a lot of other reading and stuff. And it sort of led to it supplanting my old belief system rather than like I lost one and then I had to rebuild another. It was just sort of like, well, the bucket was emptied from the bottom and I just filled it back in from the top. Like I'm actually a really big sort of like anthropology hobbyist, I guess. And, I've read a lot of Dawkins, like his Ancestor's Tale, which I think is sort of a fascinating book if you're interested in that kind of evolution and stuff. So I sort of get what you're talking about. Like for me, it is kind of like looking back at sort of primitive humanity and seeing like every sort of almost great filter that we had to get through to get to where we are today. It's very much it had, and I don't say this in any way to take away from anyone who is religious and believes in that way, but like it's almost sort of its own sort of like religious story about how just like determination, getting smarter, evolving, and we managed to beat the odds and get where we are.
I've often found it easier to accept the concept of an omniscient force that is very gently guiding human development than the concept of, well, we didn't exist and then suddenly we did.
Mm-hmm.
Just, because of those like great filter events. It's a little bit like, was it just luck, or is there something more to it than that? I don't know.
Yeah. We got another cat joining the call.
Yeah.
This is Pixel. She's joining us here.
I would like, if you feel like this is a good place to transition to it, I'd like for you to talk a little bit about all the research that you put into this, because you were very kind to send us the quick start guide to start reading through before we got rolling on it. And I was impressed at all the detail that was involved in that. Like you've clearly put the work in on a lot of stuff. Cause like, and like, I'm just disappointed that I didn't get to really see any kind of bestiary or anything. Because
still to come. Yeah.
Yeah. Because like, I also am like really interested in like Ice Age megafauna and stuff like that, the like glyptodons, etc. Just knowing what you would have to, all the research you have to put in for that kind of stuff too, not just on the human origin stuff, like having to go into like animal fossil record and stuff like that. Like that's a huge lift.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what? I'll start with that, and just since I don't have a preview of that for anyone specifically, I will say I have a spreadsheet sitting in my Google Drive right now that has. I'm not looking at it, but it's probably like 350 creatures currently listed on it. I'm sure not all of those are going to get individual entries in the bestiary, because a lot of them are various types of mammoths, right? And various types of cats and creatures. Or whatever.
Just treat it like the Monster Manual dragons entry, right? It's like, okay, dragons, and then it's got all the different subtypes of dragons.
Well, and honestly, that's probably a little bit more how it's going to go, is a little bit more like, all right, well, you want a mammoth. Here's kind of a base mammoth stat block. And then, oh, well, if you're in this environment, or if you're in this one, like, here's how you tweak that to deal with that a little bit. So I'm guessing it's probably going to be somewhere around 60 to 70 creatures is probably where the bestiary is going to land, but I haven't finalized it yet, so I don't want to give an exact number, but somewhere around there is kind of what I'm shooting for.
I did have a brief moment when because almost the first thing I look for in any book, because I love monstercraft, is the bestiary. And so when I didn't see one, I was like, beans. And then I thought about it for a minute, and I was like, well, this is kind of the benefit of keeping things 5e compatible, right? I don't have to go with your bestiary. I can go to the SRD and be like, here's a big wolf, and here's a big cat, and here's a...
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's. Brandon, I'll come back to your other half of that first question.
No, that's
in a
fine.
second, but,
I told you we're very informal around here.
yeah,
Do whatever you want.
But I think that's actually one of the strengths of this, and also part of why I was okay with doing this as a no magic setting. Kind of going back to that is that it is 5e compatible. Like, you can play with your warlocks and sorcerers in the setting if you want to. Like, it's not going to break it to do that. But those already exist. I didn't need to reinvent that wheel to do this. So here's my 6 new classes around, they're built around the, you have a strength character, you have your dexterity character, but what does a non-magical intelligence character look like? What does a non-magical wisdom character look like? What are those things to humans? So suddenly you start having people who are more like, well, I really actually influence people or inspire people or whatever. It's kind of getting back to those core, like, I don't know, bard things, but without it being magical. It's more just like, yeah. Anyhow,
Well,
so
especially in Paleolithic times, having somebody who is a critical thinker, kind of a big deal.
Kind of a huge deal. Yeah, you can do a lot of stuff. So I don't know. To me, that was kind of one of the strengths of it. Was that it's 5e. You can tack on all of that. So let's do something different and expand what 5e is. We don't have to keep doing the same thing over.
Yeah.
But as far as the research goes, I didn't start it at 15 or whatever, but like you, at this point, I'm kind of an armchair science nerd of all of the kind of various sciences of prehistory at this point. I've gotten into a lot of the anthropology and the paleontology and just the various aspects of it. A lot of it. I just started doing a lot of the reading because I needed to know this stuff and to understand what it meant. And then, like, the more I learned, the more I wanted to learn about it. It kind of built on itself. I mean, the hard science stuff is really, really fascinating to me, but the stuff I really think is really cool is a lot of the anthropology that we have with some of the first peoples that we still have, or that we were able to encounter at various times. I've been very careful in the game. Like, I am not trying to emulate any specific people groups or anything like that. I'm definitely going to be bringing on some sensitivity reading to make sure I'm not crossing over into anybody's areas or culturally appropriating anything. But for me, the stuff that I think I've loved learning the most is about the Australian Dreamtime and some of their ability to date back their culture through their stories and histories and oral traditions is just incredible. And there's also let me see. I'm trying to remember what the author is. There's a book that I read recently that's just really stuck with me. I'm just pulling it up here. Elizabeth Marshall Thomas is The Old Way: A Story of the First People, where she went to live with the Bush people in Africa in the 1950s. Her dad took her there basically before they were integrated into Africa as a larger society, and it's just to me that sort of hands-on look at the cultures that can trace back so far. I don't know, that kind of thing is just incredible to me. So I've read a lot of articles, and there's probably not going to be a source list directly in the book. I'm not trying to write it as a textbook.
Yeah, you make sure your footnotes and your annotated bibliography,
right.
please.
I'm gonna say I have somewhere kind of in the back of my head that, like, if the Kickstarter does really well, maybe there's a certain funding level where I can work with some educators or something and put together some kind of education resources so that teachers can use the game in schools. And maybe if we do that, maybe there's more connection back to, like, the actual some of the actual science and stuff that I've been reading. But
That'd be really cool.
It's a weird thing, right? Because, like, I've been doing all this and I'm trying to put it in, but, like, it's a game. It's not a scientific artifact.
Right.
So I'm trying to balance that out a little bit.
Yeah, you want it to be as accurate and reflective of real history as you can, but also it's not a peer-reviewed journal that you're submitting it to. Yeah.
Exactly. And yeah. And at the end of the day, it's also my interpretation of all of this that I've been pulling together. So
right. I mean, we had like a similar conversation with the creators of Nations and Cannons when we had them on the podcast last year, because we were talking about a lot of the same things, like, sensitivity to, like, actually what was going on in history and how to weigh that against the fact that it's a game, and we want to respect the fact both that it's a game that we're creating for enjoyment, but also, like, there are these real world issues we need to be concerned about. So yeah, it's interesting that even, like, as far back as you're sort of casting your story, like, that's still something we need to be worried about and just attuned to.
It's really important to me to do it, because I don't know, I think that the more we can make the games that we play accurate and encompass the actual experience and understanding of the people that could be impacted by them, the more we all can learn from them. And so if I'm already playing in history with this, I need to do it in the way that can best honor the history. And so part of that is working with the people who can most closely be hurt or helped by what I'm doing, I think.
Absolutely. Well, and I can say for sure that there's absolutely a lot of educators around the country right now who are looking at TTRPGs as resources largely for things like team building. But if they could have it be team building and education focused while still feeling very game-like, I think that's a slam dunk, quite frankly.
Yeah, and I mean, that's part of the thing is, like, I don't know how much curriculum really has to be put together, as long as it's, but I think there is a way to potentially do it. I could absolutely see this being something that teachers could love. And I mean, nothing would make me happier than to know that there's, a teacher somewhere. I mean, that's a win for the game. I mean, that pretty much makes it worthwhile to me if that was the story that got back to me.
Your answer to this like line of questioning has sort of answered my next question too, because the next thing I wanted to talk about was I think it's really interesting how you have limited the player characters to just playing Homo Sapiens, because, like, you get, when you're reading through the quick start rules, it's like, hey, here's the 6 steps you need to create your character. You're like, step 1, choose your species. You only have one option, so this shouldn't take very long. But later in there, like, it's describing I think it was describing like a potential combat scenario or something like that. And you're like, you could be facing off against like a Neanderthal chieftain that is trying to inspire like his group to attack. So clearly other members of the genus are in the game, but I'm interested to know, because, like, honestly, what the thing I was working on a couple of years ago, like, I guess it might have been because I was sort of locked into this D&D class mold, race mold kind of thing. And I was like, oh, well, you need to going to be able to play like a Neanderthal, and maybe they're going to have buffs for this. Maybe you're going to play like Florianensis, and they'll be almost like halflings essentially. Rudolfensis, maybe like figure out some way to make it reasonable to play a Homo habilis or something like that, because you have to go back about 100,000 years to do that. But I'm just really interested in what sort of drove the decision for like, nope, A Homo sapiens. That's it.
I mean, well, I'll answer this two ways. Like, first of all, it's where I started, just from my journey, and so, I know everybody is fascinated by Neanderthal, like as am I, but to me, kind of the core journey for me has been the human journey, and I think we can definitely say that they are part of our family tree, in a way, but it's not our direct path necessarily. Kind of secondarily, it still could show up as a race. Species, I guess I could say.
You got to hit those stretch goals.
Yeah, you gotta hit the stretch goals. I did Homo sapiens first because with doing the 6 classes and then the totem paths being subclasses
we haven't even talked about yet.
Yeah, but anybody can use them. It's a lot to play test, and so adding another variable into all of that playtest was just like, let's just do it one thing at a time.
Yeah.
So once I kind of know all of that is working, I haven't quite hit on the thing that makes an interesting gameplay piece for them yet.
You would have to be really different with it. Yeah.
Yeah, like what's different enough about them, like, oh, if their intelligence score is different, like, I also don't want to make assumptions about them that aren't entirely backed up by science in the way that we want to, or that are depending on maybe some older science, because our story of Neanderthal has really has changed since, the last 20 years, basically, since DNA started, and but we've learned so much about them. So I don't know. It's a weird question for me. They will probably end up showing up somehow as a playable species within it.
Yeah.
I'm not. Species, I guess, is the right word. I don't
they're,
know. I'm still playing with the right nomenclature for the book.
Oh yeah, Homo neanderthalensis is a species, just like Homo sapiens is a species. Like, they're all humans because that's the genus.
Humans.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, but yeah, like, I guess you're right. Like, anything that you would be doing with a Neanderthal would necessarily have to be extrapolated from hypothesis at this point, because like we can't test it, and even like 30 or 40 years ago, there were some ideas out there about, Neanderthal culture and stuff based on like fossil findings and things that I think have been debunked now. So there's a lot of speculation. So you'd almost have to do it almost as like a cultural difference, because at least you could invent that almost.
Right. And I'm certain you don't want to get caught up in like racial essentialism either. So like I can see why you would take the path you have taken, and why you would be like, maybe I'll add other things. I'm not going to make any promises though.
Yeah. If I can hit on the right way to do it, because I think there is something very interesting. I think there could be a lot of fun to be had and a lot of things to learn possibly within playing within that. But like you're saying, I definitely want to avoid. There's so much problematic stuff if you go back far enough in all of this, in all of the science of this stuff. Trying to avoid some of that and making sure it fits within the framework of how I want it all to fit together.
I will say I understand what you're saying though, because as I was going through the quick start rules, at first I was like, oh, okay, I knew going into it that you could only play humans, but I just thought it was funny when you're like, yep, that's your only choice, let's keep going. And then I get down further and I finally get to the totem paths and everything, and that's when I was like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, it's almost entirely artificial that we're just humans, because we get so much else that we can use to customize it with. So it made sense for me once I got down there and really understood what you were going for.
I will also say it'd probably be good for us to talk a little bit about some of the different classes you can choose from and the totem path system. But I really like the fact that everybody gets the opportunity to pick a totem path, and you could have everybody picking the same totem path or different ones. And it doesn't really, it's totally up to the individual to make that choice. In part of why I like that so much, I think, is because it's not only giving the player agency, but it's pointing out that a lot of the differences between individuals at that point in time were cultural.
Yeah.
And I was just gonna say, it almost feels to me like like a version of character creation from like Shadowrun, for example, when you've just got all that variability just by putting different stuff in your different slots and everything. So everything starts pretty much at the same base level. And I know this is a little bit different from that because we do have the 6 classes that are based on the ability stats and everything. But it seems like almost you're drawing from 2 traditions there.
Yeah. It's been really interesting kind of in some of the playtesting I've been doing. It's kind of the consistent feedback I've gotten is that the gameplay or the classes play very like tall instead of wide, if that makes any sense. Like you're very much, if you're playing the mighty champion, which is the strength character, you're going to feel very strong in the game. You're not going to be the best talker in the game, right? Like, and so there is really this interesting thing where you can take your totem paths and kind of mesh some of that together, so you can either really go down that strength path and like just double down on it and become that thing and be amazing at it, or you can be really good at it but also kind of add some things in from how you choose the totem path. And it's all that player agency, and also through the feats that you're choosing. But what it ends up doing is it really creates this thing where you have to work as a team. Is kind of ultimately the thing that happens, because you need that person who can really hit hard, but you also need the person who can really talk good. You may need them at different times. You may need the person who can, run fast or dodge out of the way of things, or all of the things have kind of these very specific aspects that they are the best at. And when you start working as a team, you really do start doing better at the game, right? Like your survival goes up, your ability to face the combat situations you're in goes up. Just all of it works better, which is weirdly something that is to me, base 5e is a little more wide instead of tall. I know there's classes that are kind of your skill monkey classes, but there's a lot of utility across the board, I think, for a lot of the classes.
Well, yeah, I think about why I usually always play like a bard, for example, right? Like, because you can do anything if you're a bard. You can inspire people, you can cast, you can do some pretty decent melee damage and everything. So yeah, I get what you're talking about there.
Yeah. So all of that is very intentional to kind of go down that, but it is kind of a very customizable thing, and it also thematically was important for this, because the level of education and the knowledge that people have had would have been very different than how we access today and understand today. And so within your clan, within your tribe, which those are kind of separated out within the book. The clan is kind of your local 20 or 30 people that you live with day to day, and then the tribe is kind of the larger gathering that may come together of the various clans. You would have people who like, oh, you know what, I'm very good at hunting. Oh, you know what, I'm very good at basket weaving. Like it sounds dumb, but like basket weaving was actually a very important skill.
Yeah, it's how you carry stuff.
Well, I was hearing recently that clothing manufacture took like months. Like just making a shirt was a process that would take months and months to do before we had a lot of modern technology. And so you think about, like, you can't have someone who's out hunting every day and sewing clothing. Like, that's not, no.
Yeah, exactly. And so people would have, I mean, you would know multiple skills, but you would also have things that you were probably the person to go to for that thing. And so it is thematically trying to do that as well, more so than I think kind of base 5e does.
And I think this is probably a good time for us just to sort of spell out like the totem system and just like walk through it.
Yeah. So it's basically the replacement for subclasses. So rather than oh, I'm a warlock and now I've got my half a dozen subclasses that I can choose from. Now I'm a mighty champion. I'm an intuitive sage. Whatever class I have chosen, intelligence, dexterity, strength, whichever thing I'm going for. At third level, I have to remember where they are. I don't have it pulled up. At the various levels that you get the thing. I think third, 6, 11, and 16 or something. Whatever levels you get all the things. You get to choose. At third, you pick your totem path, and then you unlock stuff from there every few levels.
It's 3, 6, 10, and 14. I just looked.
I was close. All right. But anybody can take any of the totem paths. So if you are a warrior, you can take the cave bear path, which is probably the most familiar one in the quick start guide. It's very much based on the 5e barbarian class that everybody is familiar with, and it's a great totem path because you will do a lot of damage in your battles, especially if you're coupling it with like a mighty champion or something like that. You are going to do a lot of damage. But you also could take one of the other classes. You could be like an Otter Totem and have, I believe Otter Totem is like a lot of social stuff, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes.
Like you're going to get things that give you specific ways to interact with people and do, like you can do an insight check. And if you succeed on that and if your saving throws and things go correctly, you'll know whether they're lying or telling the truth kind of for like the next 24 hours. Like you can get social skills out of your totem path if you want that. So you can.
I was sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just had a thought. Like, so if you were like, let's say you were the Silver Tongue, the charisma based class. Like, what if you stacked like Otter Totem on top of that? Would you be like super charismatic? Like, does it work? Do the rules work that way? Okay.
Yeah. Everything. So like if you have proficiency in something, like you're going to get expertise in it, right? Like it's going to stack on those kind of things with skills. You're going to, you'll unlock whatever you get.
Class could be your undergraduate degree and totem could be your graduate degree.
Yeah. Okay. And then also there are feats. All of the feats have been, they're specific to the setting, basically. Other than, I've kind of brought in the ASI feat that one D&D has been doing. That's it's handled now more as a feat than anything. Because I am trying to kind of keep parity with what it looks like the new edition of D&D is going to.
Sure, and that's only good business sense.
Right. And so that may get revised when we see what those new books are. But the feats also let you focus in on things. So you also could, add in weapon fighting styles. You can add in I'm trying to think some of the feats there are, there's
I'm looking through it right now. There's like mindfulness, focusing your mind, channel your wisdom into your attacks and bolster your defenses. Like there are a ton of fighting style ones like protection, 2-weapon, unarmed, stuff like knowledgeable, robust, vigilant, which, a lot of them seem kind of self-explanatory.
Yeah. It is, kind of trying to bring a lot of that stuff to let you do your character the way you want to do your character. And it doesn't, there are probably ways to game the system a little bit and make an overly powerful character, but it's going to be overly powerful in one aspect. It's not going to be in all aspects. So it won't be game breaking. It will be situationally breaking at worst. Yeah.
Can you describe for us like what you imagine like a session of this will look like? Because obviously, like without magic, that takes, you know, a not insignificant chunk out of some of the storytelling on there. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing by any means, but especially with the setting being where it is, do you imagine more of a focus on exploration rather than social? Do you imagine more of a combat focus? Just because, like, you know, that's what the D&D gameplay loop is based on, right? So just how do you see a session of this differing from, let's say, your stereotypical session of traditional D&D?
So a couple of ways to kind of look at that. In a lot of ways, it's very similar because it is building on the same pillars. I think there is more survival and exploration to it. I definitely have some new guidelines for handling some of that are in this. That hopefully will make that more of a pillar. I think it's a little bit of a pillar within D&D that is less accentuated than a couple of the others. Obviously, combat seems to be kind of the main one. I think weirdly enough, I think combat gets pulled back just a little bit. I think it will happen, but I think it's maybe not quite the primary aspect always, because it comes with extra risk that maybe you didn't have before.
That's true. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. And so there's an element of, because of the extra risk of it, just in the nature of that existing, it changes how people approach the game. And so your storytelling changes just because of how players act a little bit. There's going to be more negotiation. There's going to be more thinking about, can we avoid this encounter? Can we find an alternate way of dealing with it? So that changes a little bit at a core level. I think just from that nature of everything.
Can you actually talk a little bit about, as you're speaking about advanced risk, how the health system in this game works and recovering from a risky encounter that maybe doesn't go so well?
Yeah. So in the game, I've shifted the terminology from hit points to stamina points, and it's stamina dice instead of hit dice, trying to kind of break the concept. I mean, I think if you read the player's handbooks and Dungeon Master's guides, it's pretty clear that hit points are an abstract idea, but I think it's very easy to consider them, literally your physical health that you have in that moment.
These are the ounces of blood I can bleed.
Yeah.
Right.
I did like how you summarize that in the quick start guide, because you're just like, yeah, this is just an imaginary mechanic that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, what is a hit point? I always think back when I hear stuff like that to, like, when I was getting a friend of mine into D&D and we'd played a few sessions, and he's like, I'm just imagining some dwarf sitting in a tavern drinking a beer being like, yep, and that's how I got to level 9.
Exactly. So it is like, I've tried to abstract it out into this other thing where we're talking about stamina instead of health, because your stamina is a thing that you can revive throughout the day. It's a thing that you can take some time out, and eating a meal, taking a little bit of downtime, whatever it is, like that is going to revive your stamina potentially to a full level if you handle your day correctly, which is not the same thing if you have gaping wounds on your body. Those aren't going to disappear, right? So that's kind of my shift in trying to abstract that to a different concept. The resting mechanics, they're not really spelled out in the quick start guide, but fully, I don't. There's actually going to be another piece that's going to launch with the Kickstarter, which is going to be an adventure that you can play, which will have some beasts and things in it as well. I might be able to pull one of those.
And I just want to make sure before we wrap up, I am going to do a screen share of the Kickstarter, so you can sort of walk us through it and talk about all that stuff.
Yeah. So the adventure is going to have a little bit more of kind of the first playtest idea. I'm handling both of these books as playtests, so they have opportunity to provide feedback in them, because I do want to make sure all of this is working before the game comes out. So the playtest around resting, recovery, health, all of that kind of thing is, if you're in your home camp, if you're in another safe camp, you can, recovery is handled pretty normally to 5e. Like, if you're in a safe place, you can recover.
Well, you can fully relax in a location like that in a way you can't if you're in the wild.
Yeah, let's do a long rest in this Lich's dungeon.
Right. Yeah. If you're out in the wilderness, then there's another kind of abstracted mechanic that I've done that I'm calling supply, which is kind of the element that you have with you that encompasses the food that you're carrying, the water you're carrying, your ability to survive and be comfortable for a day. If you have supply, you can spend it to take a normal long rest, but you have a limited resource of supply with you that you can use. If you run out of supply or don't wish to use supply, then you can take kind of a more limited long rest while you're out in the wilderness, which basically it gives you some benefits, but it basically doesn't supply any of those stamina points back without spending stamina dice, and it doesn't require or it doesn't provide levels of exhaustion back to you, which exhaustion plays a much bigger thing in this game as well.
I was going to ask you about status effects and how that's going to play into it. Cause like the immediate thing I thought of, like, okay, I'm somebody in the Stone Age and I'm getting in a fight. Maybe like or even I just fall or something and I like break my leg. Like gangrene is, that becomes a big concern, stuff like that. And I didn't know if you worked that into like status effects like that.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be. I'm going to keep it a little more optional for some of the debilitating things, because some tables enjoy that more than others. But there will definitely be options for it, I think is maybe the best way to put that.
Got it.
The other interesting thing, though, is that I think if you do play with them, it really does up that tension level. So it would be my recommended way to play, right? Like,
let's figure out how we can avoid this combat, or let's figure out how we can avoid even like getting too close to the edge of this mountain or something.
And so like when you're traveling, it kind of changes, it kind of changes exploration and survival and that kind of thing, because when you're traveling now, even if you don't have a terrible day, if you gain a level of exhaustion, now you have to question, like, well, do I spend supply at the end of this day as I'm out trying to find whatever I'm out trying to find? Do I spend my limited resource to get rid of this level of exhaustion, or am I going into my next day with a -1 to everything? Or has it stacked and now we're at 3 levels of it?
Yeah.
And like, at some point everything starts stacking, and it can get really really tricky very, very quickly.
And we're not in a place where there's anything like domestication or beasts of burden or anything, really, right?
Yeah, correct. That all starts after this time frame. So yeah. And so also kind of to answer the question of what maybe happens during the game, which I think is how we got onto all of this.
Yeah.
Part of the Kickstarter is I'm also putting together a full level 1 to 20 adventure path. And part of the reason to do that is because I think this is such a different take on everything that I don't know that everyone will quite know how to play it. And so
That's fair.
having adventures that show off how to do this and how you might scale this from 1 to 20, I think is a very important aspect of what I have to provide to make this a usable product.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah,
I at times struggle with the concept of D&D 5e level 20 play.
Yeah,
I can't even comprehend what we're talking about right now.
When we were expanding some of the public games that we were playing, we went to like a third location and we're like, how do we differentiate this? And it's like, we'll run games that start at level 10. And we'd previously started playing it like between 1 to 3, and we started playing this like 5 or 6 tables at level 10, and it just got wild really quick because people were coming in with these like optimized level 10 characters and just destroying everything, no matter what we were throwing at it.
We got up to level 17 in that campaign, and it was the stuff people can do at level 17 in that system.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
Well, I mean, that's also part of why I stripped the magic out.
Yeah.
because at some point, you know, when you can wish for anything,
yeah,
like you can. I mean, I'm not trying to harsh the buzz on anybody's enjoyment of high level, because I think there is fun in that. Just we can do anything, we are gods kind of thing. There is fun in that, but that's not what I'm trying to do with this specifically, right? So
yeah. It's my preference too. Like I was saying, like I like lower level, lower magic kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like I write union and trade disputes into a lot of the adventures that I write because I like it very much real world.
So, and what I can say about kind of the larger campaign is the kind of the core conceit behind it is basically every tier. So about every 5 levels or so in it, you kind of do a time jump, and then the next time you play, you're playing like a descendant of previous characters.
Yes.
So there's kind of this element of like the first 5 levels, you're dealing with a specific set of situations, and then depending how you deal with that, you're going to either help or hinder your clan and tribe, which is going to give you either advantages or disadvantages of the next set of things. So there's kind of this generational play of things, and That's awesome. It's about kind of developing this longer term concept of everything. I'm also planning on trying to put in information if you do enjoy playing everything at lower level. Well, here's how you scale down the level 15 to 20 section. You can play it at level 5 or whatever. Like so having that kind of thing, you can play it at any tier you would like to play.
Oh, I'm sorry. You had me at generational play. I stopped listening at that point just because you've already romanced me enough on this. Just like the idea of hybridizing this with like Crusader Kings or something like that. That's just fantastic.
Yeah. So you can play the same archetype and totem path if you want to, and it can be the great grandson, and you have there's if you did heroic things in the previous one, you might have a some kind of passed down weapon that turns out to be like that's how you get your +1 or +2 to something.
Or you have to redeem like your father's shame from like 30 years ago or something like that. Probably more like 15 years ago, given the lifespans. Yeah.
And if you had a total party wipe, you can still move on. And you're like, well, here's what happens because if everybody died, we just jump to the next storyline, and you kind of fill in the gaps.
And now these kids are gonna go kill the cave bears that killed their parents.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I love fail forward just in general in my TTRPGs. So the fact that you've got fail forward in your campaign, pretty awesome. Yeah, pretty awesome.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff will all be outlined in the adventure path you're talking about. Oh, that's just fantastic. I want to, before we run out of time, because we're at like an hour at this point, and we can go as long as we want to, but
sure.
I don't want to take up everybody's time, but I want to make sure we do bring up the Kickstarter over here and just walk through it a little bit. This is the project draft version of it, and like we said, it's going to launch on March 5th. So when you're listening to this, tomorrow morning. So I would just love for you to talk about some of the stuff in here. Like you've got your helpful table of contents right here. But just lead us through this a little bit.
So I mean, it's really just trying to lay out what the project is. It is. We have five reward levels at this point. You can kind of come in at a $1 if you just want to follow along. We've got a digital version where you get all the PDFs. There's a Roll20 version where we're gonna do a conversion over to the Roll20. There's going to be a print version, which is kind of the whole reason of doing this, is that
Right.
I want to do a print version of this,
Right.
And to do it the way that I want to do it, I
Right.
need to raise funds to do it.
Yeah.
And then there's a retailer version. So if you're a retailer who wants to carry this, that's something you can do. There's 3 books in total that are being worked on as part of the campaign. I've talked about them, I think, a little bit here, but there's the core book, which is, I mean, it's in the title, but it's I would say the GM facing book the most. It will have player facing information in it, but it's really the book for the GM. It's going to have all of the rules. It's going to have the bestiary. It's going to have all of the setting information, all of the, hey, here's how you run a campaign in this. It's going to be that book. There's going to be a player's guide, which is going to have all of the player rules in it. It's going to be a smaller volume that you can hand to a player, or you can send the PDF to a player or whatever. It's going to have the rules. It's going to have all the classes, all the tome classes, all the equipment, feats, all of that kind of stuff. Everything you need to make your character and to be able to play. It's also going to have the short version of the setting guide, because we all know how much players actually read the material that we provide them.
Right.
But enough to understand what it means to play in this setting, right? Just try to give them as much information as they can have.
I had a quick question, not to derail, but I saw on here World and History Primer, and that reminded me of a question I was going to ask you. So this is post Ice Age, so there shouldn't be like a Bering Strait crossing or anything.
No, technically, this is still Ice Age. Stone Age and Ice Age coincide. Like, it's all the whole time frame of everything is very tricky. You definitely could play Bering Strait crossing as part of this if you wanted to. May come into the adventure path.
Who knows? Who could say?
But it's definitely the sort of thing. When I say that the World and History primer, the core book is going to outline what is happening on Earth between about 70,000 years ago and about 20,000 years ago, give or take. Well, give or take. And it's going to cover all of the continents that had human populations on them. It's going to talk about what the world actually looked like at that point, because it wasn't identical to how it is now, because we were going through the ice ages at that point, and there was freezing and thawing and things changing. There was people were moving around, so it tries to kind of cover all of that within the primer of, like, if you want to set this 70,000 years ago in Africa, you can. If you want it 50,000 years ago in Australia and the islands of that area, you can do that. If you want to play in Europe, in kind of that classic worm ice age thing that I think everybody thinks of when they're thinking of this stuff, you can do that. It's all gonna kind of be in there.
I'm such a nerd. You're talking about this, and I'm like, no, but Lauren, I need to know about the sea level. What is the sea level? Is Sahul still a thing? I didn't mean to derail you on that. I just wanted to ask you that before I forgot.
Yeah. So, but I mean, that's the kind of stuff. The players don't need all of that. That's not going to be in the player guide. That's core book kind of material. So that's, if you're kind of trying to think this stuff through, that's kind of how it is. But the stuff that would be in the player guide is going to be, what does it mean to be a prehistoric person? Like, what kind of knowledge would you have? What would your day-to-day life be like? More of those things that are a little more player facing, and how to deal with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. This is another thing that I had read and forgot to ask you about, but also there's a crafting element to the game through like herbalism and stuff like that. Can you talk about that for just a minute?
Yeah. it's been really fascinating reading about medicine and hunting and the poisons and toxins that were being used during the hunting for some of the early peoples and things. So there are going to be some rules and guidelines around how you can do some of those different things. There were surgeries being performed, and there were amputations and things successfully happening. People lived for years, maybe dozens of years after having amputations. We have documentation of this stuff. We know about things like using naturally occurring antibiotic material to help treat infections. There's really fascinating stuff, and so trying to turn that into gameplay elements that can assist you, since you don't have magic to heal you, having any kind of advantage.
Yeah.
And also if you can have some toxins to help take down the creatures that you're fighting. We know that there were poison tipped arrows and things that were used that would stop the animals and petrify them. That's not the right word. You know what I mean?
That sounds like magic to me.
Petrify is the wrong word, but yes, stop them in place.
Paralyze them.
Paralyze. There's the word I'm after. Yeah, paralyze. Goodness, it's late on a Friday evening, but stuff like that. Those were real technologies that were being used, and maybe not everywhere, but still having access to some of that, I think, is useful for the game. So that's definitely elements that are going to be included.
Mm-hmm. I have to go back as we're talking about petrifying and that's magic, and I'm like, I mean, you could have Greek style gorgons be a naturally occurring foe in the area. You could have mystic creatures, because people have written those monster blocks. They exist. You can blend all this together because you have the flexibility of everything anyone's ever created for 5e.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very, if you want to play kind of that anachronistic Lost World style of thing, I think it's very easy to make that shift with minimal effort out of this.
Which makes this kind of a beautiful get for someone who's looking to integrate components of a Paleolithic world, even if they don't want to run a Paleolithic campaign necessarily, because you've got a lot of really cool stuff in here that's very authentic and very well thought out, that slots right in wherever you want it to.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, all the math works together, right? Like the core engine. That's part of why it's built on 5e. Is it's a core engine that runs this thing. The math works, and you can couple it with any other 5e math, and it's all going to connect.
Yeah, well, and using Josh's example of a gorgon, right? Let's say you're playing a group of people that are over in Greece or somewhere over there. All you need is one gorgon in this game, and it becomes a world-ending threat from the perspective of these people. You don't even have to go overboard with it.
No,
it's
easy to escalate. Easy to
any
escalate.
magic you would introduce would greatly impact. I'll also say just interesting stuff. There is the Raven Totem pathway. I didn't touch on that, but there's a whole thing about how you can basically go into a drug-induced state and interfere or enter the spirit world if you want to kind of do that shaman thing.
Oh, that was also with the Raven Totem, was it?
Yeah. But again, it's all still kind of based in reality. It's not actual magic. It's you're kind of tripping on mushrooms.
I was just thinking as we were talking about some of this stuff, this would be really great. I'm sure somebody out there is going to do this, but create a setting that's essentially the Avengers 1 million BC comic book run. that had like, you know, like Odin and like a Ghost Rider that rode a mammoth and stuff like that. Like if you wanted to do a wild Marvel mashup with the Stone Age, this would be the perfect foundation on which to build it.
Nice.
All right, let's get back to this because we still haven't. Yeah. You talked a little bit about the adventure path,
Right.
but I wanted to make sure you were able to talk that through fully.
Yeah, so it is. This is the third book that's as part of this set. It is an adventure path, a level 1 to 20 campaign. Again, it's kind of that generational legacy concept. I think, you know, I kind of think I got some of the idea for it. I think probably when I was playing some of those pandemic legacy games back in the 2018, 2019, when some of that stuff was coming out originally. I don't know. I really like the idea of things that I mean, it's not original to that, but kind of, you know, that thing where your choices really matter. That Mass Effect thing that you can argue whether it really paid off or not, but you know, that thing where
continuity and consequences.
The continuity and consequence, right? Yeah. And so that's really what I'm trying to go for here, is kind of that through line and that story. And, you know, it is kind of taking that sweeping thing of the history of this time and trying to frame it out into a full adventure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. You even call that out here, like branching narratives and everything. Yeah. That makes sense. Like, so let me ask you then. So with the adventure path, if we're talking about consequences and branching narratives, like, does the adventure path follow sort of different trees of where to take stuff?
Yes. It is kind of a tree branched system. Things kind of basically you kind of come to a few different ways things can end before you kind of move to the next era, and there's kind of like a little phase in between where you kind of, as the GM, figure out and kind of sit with your players and work out the state of the world based on how everything happened. So there's it can play out a few different ways over the time of things, because your starting point, you know, in tier 2 could be very different based on your actions in tier 1. You could have, I'll kind of say, you know, the tier 1 adventure starts with a natural disaster that you're trying to save your people from. Mm-hmm. And so if you are successful in that, you're going to start tier 2 in a much stronger position than if you were not able to save anybody.
Right.
And these situations you find yourself in by the end of that tier 1 really impact a lot of that kind of thing. And, you know, as it kind of branches out from there, there are more and more kind of ways that it can morph out. I mean, you know, it's a D&D adventure kind of at the end of the day. At some point you can't know all the things a player is going to try to do. So a lot of it is more trying to also give the GM options on how they can adjudicate the outcomes a little bit as well, because stuff can, and, you know, we know players will take things in ways that you were never expecting.
Yeah. Oh, so. I'll tell you though, it's so comforting to know that as a GM, if I'm playing this, I will not be, I won't have an NPC with a secret and just be sitting there constantly terrified that somebody's going to cast Zone of Truth.
There's no Zone of Truth. Yeah. Oh.
Just keeping magic out of it just makes me feel so much more secure in running something. But you have on here, who is this book for, in your additional information? So tell me, how do you sell this game to me, a person who has admittedly several times in this conversation been like, well, this is just amazing. It's Stone Age, no magic, 5e. Those are the core things of it. And I think if those three things resonate with you, then this is definitely the book for you. If any of those things don't resonate with you,
I'm guessing probably the first one of those might be 5e. I know there are people who do not particularly enjoy the 5e experience, which fair to you. I'm not trying to get you to play something that you don't want to play. There's a lot of stuff in this book set that I think would be useful to you potentially if you want to run something in this type of world. There's going to be a ton of setting information. There is going to be a ton of, just a ton of stuff worked out, tables and exploration pieces and ideas and things that you can use. There's going to be story and adventures. You may have to change some of the math to make it work in your particular system. And that's maybe the hurdle that you will have if you want to use this. But I think, probably about 90% of the material in here, 85, 90% of it is probably system agnostic at some point. A random events table is something everybody can use.
Yeah.
Setting information is something you can use. The bestiary, even if their stats don't quite line up, they probably can get you pretty close to what you're after for this type of game.
Mm-hmm. I will also say that for the folks who are like, hey, I really want to get away from 5e, if you're looking for a jumping off point for your table to move into something a little more realism, a little bit more like survival elements, and they're like, oh, I don't know how much fun that's going to be. This is a stepping stone for you. Yeah. You can use this to launch off into other systems. Independently created. None of your money is going back to Wizards of the Coast. Like, you can feel good about this on every level, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about this just very briefly earlier, but I want to make sure you have a chance to address the future proofing here with your compatibility.
Yeah. I'm highly aware that 2024 D&D is coming out later this year. We just got big press stuff about that in the last couple of weeks of their release schedule and everything. Mm-hmm. And I'm excited to see it. For me, I've been watching the playtest very carefully. I've been reading all the material. I think it's there's stuff I would do differently, obviously, and this is my chance to do some of it differently. But I'm also I also want to stay compatible with all of it. So, I will be watching the release as it comes out. Hopefully there's a new OGL or an updated OGL that gets released with everything that makes it even easier to keep stuff. But, even now the stuff that I've been doing has all filtered through the 1D&D playtest material. Everything in the playtest quick start that I have took the 1D&D playtest in mind as I was writing it. It is fully, I think, compatible and fully in line with where they are headed with everything. But also won't be a huge jumping off point from what you're used to either.
One of the things I've been repeating sort of over and over again over the last year, I guess at this point, is everybody just doomsaying D&D after everything that happened in January 2023. Oh, Dungeons and Dragons, it's on its last legs. And I've seen so many doomsaying YouTube headlines that it's just like, oh, D&D is at the lowest point it's ever been at. And obviously that's a bunch of BS, right? But I keep saying, well, no, let's say everybody just rejects 1D&D, 6e, whatever you want to call it, just out of hand, right? Well, 5e is in Creative Commons for eternity. Yeah. So people, even if they don't like that, people are going to be able to play 5e forever. And it's the most popular D&D edition that there's ever been. So I think in 20 years, we'll still have a pretty strong 5e player base, Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we have what, 4 or 5 other core 5e product, systems coming out. The Kobold presses and your Cubicle 7s, and all of it. There's so many. I mean, 5e is, it is the cultural zeitgeist of, for good and for ill, of tabletop role playing, and this fits within that milieu of everything, but is hopefully doing something a little bit different.
Oh, I've scrolled down to the stretch goals, and what do I see here down at the bottom? Expanded character options and lore to allow optional play as Neanderthals.
I will say, still in development. This list could change.
Okay.
I had to start trying to lock that down a little bit. So it's what I'm planning right now, but I am reserving the right to change that before launch. That's
okay.
all I'm saying.
All right. Your backers, your mileage may vary on that.
Yeah, we can't hold Lauren to promises that he hasn't yet made.
Yeah, exactly. This is all unofficial. We're looking at the beta. We're looking at the beta release of this Kickstarter page right now. But yeah, so real quick, let's just run through the tiers on this again. So you got your $1, just thanks. You have digitals for $45, and that's all 3 books, right? On
Correct.
that. Yeah. Then Roll20, VTT $55. Are you looking at any other VTT systems beyond Roll20?
I am. The reason I know I can do Roll20 is because I have a ton of experience with it, and I know I can do the conversion to it.
Okay.
If need be. My Foundry, specifically Foundry, because I know that's the major one that most other people would be asking for. My Foundry experience is a lot less, and so I think to give a product that I would be comfortable charging money for, I would probably want to bring in somebody else to help produce that, which is going to be an added cost. So I need to kind of see how this funds before I can promise that. But
Got it.
Reasonable.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And then 95 for all 3 books on here. What kind of page counts do you think we're looking at? I don't want to lock you into anything, but if you just had to throw a dart.
Yeah, minimum, I'm saying minimum 256 pages. That's what all of my quotes are that I'm getting back from printers and that kind of thing is based on a 256 page count. Probably more than that, but that's kind of
over the 3 books.
Per book.
Per book.
The player's guide is probably a little smaller because it is intended to be a smaller guide. So we're probably talking 600 to 700 pages minimum between all three books.
Oh well, $95 plus shipping on that. That's pretty great for 600 to 700 pages of content. I can get behind that real easy. And then your retailer set. Is there and you may not know this, is there like a cap? Are you going to have a cap on how many retailer sets you have?
Not initially, unless it becomes some kind of problem, but this which I don't quite know how that would be a problem, but
it'd be a good problem.
Yeah. I'm not really intending the Kickstarter to be a limited edition kind of thing. Ideally I would love for this to be a thing that is perpetually available, that you can continue ordering after the Kickstarter at some point, possibly at a higher price or whatever, or in some other configuration. I have definitely looked at can I do some kind of potentially limited edition for the Kickstarter? It is in the stretch goals, with
your Beetle and Grimm kind of variant cover on it.
Yeah. It's what I'm trying to do with it is kind of like it's a cloth cover with like gold foiling on it and stuff, and has kind of trying to evoke that 19th century volume of stuff. That anyhow, that's kind of what I'm trying to go with for it. Slipcase and kind of that whole
that's
vibe
great
for it.
Like an old school, very fancy encyclopedia.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know the vibe and I am here for it.
Yeah. so that is a stretch goal, if funding goes well enough. But that would definitely be limited to the Kickstarter. Plus whatever stock I have left at the end.
Right. And so it looks like we're looking at an estimated December 2025 delivery date on it.
Yeah, hopefully before then, but I'm also trying to, I've backed enough Kickstarters that I know how many delays there are and all that. So I'm trying to set expectations and then hopefully over deliver as opposed to under deliver. So
yeah. Expectation setting is always the name of the game in this kind of thing. Yeah, do not overpromise.
It is also way easier to announce that you'll be releasing something sooner than anticipated.
Yes,
exactly.
Do you like, how much of it do you have written, like percentage wise?
The core book is basically, other than the full bestiary is basically written. The bestiary is going to take a little bit of effort to do still. The adventure is completely outlined and partially written, is how I'm going to say that. It's still a work in progress, but it's a work with a full structure that is just getting filled in correctly and edited and play tested, so to make sure it actually works.
Okay, great. So obviously the Kickstarter is going to kick off tomorrow when everybody's hearing this, and we're going to have links to it in the show notes for this. We'll have links on YouTube, and we'll probably push some stuff out on our socials as well to promote this episode of this. But I want you to have a chance to throw out your socials just while we're recording too.
Oh yeah. Let's see. It's either I always have to look these up. Born from Ice is the thing to search for. On Facebook, I believe it's Born from Ice RPG, if I'm not mistaken. Nope, it says Born from Ice, and then on Instagram, Born from Ice RPG. You can go to our website, also bornfromicerpg.com. So
okay, all right, fantastic. Well, Lauren, thanks so much for taking this time, taking an hour and a half with us, really like an hour and 45 minutes, considering we had a nice conversation before we started recording, on a Friday night to chat about this. Like, I am more excited now than I was when we started this conversation, just because you've had a chance to like chat through it and explain some stuff to me. So I'm actually pretty pumped about this. And the only thing that I'm really annoyed about is waiting till potentially December 2025 on the situation.
Well, think of what a fun Christmas gift for yourself that would be.
That might end up being a fun Christmas gift for a child of mine. So there's enough time there. Do you have any closing thoughts that you want to share with us, Lauren?
No, I mean, I'm honestly, I'm just so excited to be able to finally be talking about this and sharing it with people. I've been working on this, like I said, since in some way, shape, or form since like 2017. To finally have anything out and to be this close to having it in people's hands. Like, I mean, I know it's still a year plus out, but it's also like we're here. Like it's very cool. So I'm as excited, hopefully, probably more than you are.
Probably.
I hope everybody else listening is kind of gets what I'm going for. If you have questions, I'm here to answer. Post them on the Kickstarter, whatever. I'm happy to try to answer whatever I can. And I'm looking forward to seeing how the world plays Born from Ice.
Oh, fantastic. Josh, do you have any final thoughts there?
I'm just really keen on the whole concept. I like everything we've seen, and I'm very excited for it to come out and see exactly what sorts of mayhem people cause, both internal to the structure of the game and also just pulling pieces from random shelves around them and just thrusting them into the universe and seeing what happens.
Yeah. Low magic, no problem. All right, Josh, tell the people what they need to know.
Well, there's a few things the folks need to know. They need to telegraph, tell a friend. Wait, no. Telegraph, telephone, tell a friend about the Goblins and Growlers podcast. There we go. That's the best way to get the word out about the show and to get us more listeners, because we could pay for advertising, but I don't know. My understanding is that Facebook ads, except for Born from Ice, are relatively unsuccessful. So clearly Born from Ice Facebook ads are working, because Brandon was like, we got to get this person on here. But we struggle with stuff like Facebook ads. We spend money and then people are like, oh, did you run an ad? It's like, oh. You can find us on socials at Way of Brandalore and at Black Cloak DM. You can join the conversation on our Discord at bit.ly/Goblin Discord. Come check out all of our social medias as well as our newsletter that Brandon produces monthly over at linktr.ee/Goblins and Growlers. That's got all kinds of TTRPG news as well as little useful things, and sometimes Brandon likes to do a little indie spotlight as part of the newsletter, which is always a fun thing to see fluttering through my inbox. That's only once a month. We're not talking about loads and loads of spam here, folks.
Josh, I have a feeling you're gonna feel like you're watching a rerun when you hear about the indie spotlight in the next one that comes out next week.
Well, I'll feel like I'm watching a rerun, but then people who have read it and then are listening to this episode will be like, "Oh, I got a preview. They got an advanced teaser copy of what was going to be on the episode."
Yeah, absolutely.
And then finally, come and check out our sister podcast, Quid Pro Roll, on your podcatcher of choice. That is the narrative play podcast where Brandon and I cause as much chaos and mayhem in my darling wife's campaign world, where she just wanted to have a dramatic story about bringing dragons back to the world, and Brandon brought a over-the-hill professional wrestler, and I brought a rogue who most of his baggage is with his criminal activities and not with his family, although there is family baggage as well. Both his parents are alive. It's weird. Check it out.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. And also, if you're watching this on YouTube and you've made it to this point, just subscribe. You've suffered through an hour and a half of us talking, so you should just subscribe for the rest of it.
You should reward yourself and subscribe. That's what subscribing is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So thanks, everybody, for listening. We don't know what we're going to be doing for the next episode quite yet. Josh and I need to have another production meeting, but we will catch up with you in about 2 weeks. Bye, everybody.
Bye, y'all.